Good afternoon, everyone. What can only be described as the largest floods in recorded history in China. Modern version in the new grand solar minimum. Factories flooded, no more personal protection wear or goods which were already locked up in the supply chain forthcoming. So much water, every single city downriver from the three gorges and all the way to Chongqing looks exactly the same. Small towns, large towns. Every river you see on this map is extreme flood or new record flood stage. The countryside not impervious either where they grow the crops. Local governments have been blowing levees to alleviate massive overtops and flooding across everywhere China's growing its grains. Wild card is these streams turning into massive rivers in the mountains trying to discharge as much water as they can. Landslide blocks at least one. And as soon as this earthen dam goes, this will be completely washed away. These are the type of events that are happening through China. And at the cherry on top, central government quit reporting on the inflows into the Three Gorges River Reservoir because the only thing standing between a full famine in China and the displacement of hundreds of millions of people is this battery of earthen dams being built as fast as the flood waters are rising. China's central grain growing and food growing areas, straight in the middle of the flooding. They've lost their crop for the year. Did I mention the locusts that are there now as well? Food prices can only go one direction when China starts buying massively across the planet, up and up. As Americans seek economic protection from this nationwide shutdown, Bank of America is predicting gold to $3,000 an ounce. So far in 2020, gold is the best performing asset class. And with the global economy on the brink, so many people now are looking for ways to preserve their wealth. Only one investment stands out: gold. Patriot Gold Group has no fee for life IRAs, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver. At Patriot, work directly with an owner and avoid paying absurd broker fees. Call today or request a free investment kit. PatriotGoldGroup.com. The link's in the description box below. I'm going to weave you a tale through pictures. 3 different segments from the Gorges Dam to the major cities to the croplands and what you can expect as China battles the largest floods in their recorded history. This takes us back into massive changes on the grand solar minimum 400-year low solar activity cycle. Every Chinese dynasty collapses during this time. There's not been one that survived more than 400 years, and this is a perfect example of why. There are a lot of live feeds of the Three Gorges Dam discharge area. You just have to search it out on YouTube because they're continually closing down, playing cat and mouse with the sensors over in China. I was able to get it daytime and nighttime. This is a back view. As soon as that water goes over the top of that dam, they're going to be discharging 1.5 million cubic meters per second. That'll be compared to the regular 40,000 cubic meters per second that's being discharged at the moment. Keep in mind, this is the longest discharge at this volume. So just like we saw in Oroville Dam, after the pitting and erosion started, it was a runaway effect. So I'm wondering what's happening under the dam, because this amount of grit and discharge for this prolonged period of time, never been tested. A look here at the river basins running into in the different regions of this, what is called the Three Gorges River Drainage Basin. We got the uppermost basin. Now, the uppermost basin, that's way up in the lower hills up to Tibet, Lanzhou heading west up into the Tibetan Plateau. You're not seeing much information about flooding coming out of there. But when we get to the upper basin and you see Sichuan, that's where we're starting to see a lot of outflows down into Chongqing, where they had the highest floods ever recorded in the city called Chongqing. Highly recommended to take a look at that. I did a video a few weeks back on the stupendous amounts of water that are flowing in, where 10-foot wide streams are turning into half-mile wide rivers coming out of the mountain valleys. This is now coming to the crest downstream. Then we come down to the Three Gorges Dam. Now you see Yichang behind that. Now Yichang and Three Gorges, they're meant to discharge at the same rate. Yichang was for the bottom middle basin. There's so much water coming down. Record floods everywhere that they have to open both at the same time. This is what the engineers talked about when they said, beware of these projects. It's not flood control. it was electricity generation, and they are starting to see what the engineers meant by capturing that and letting the flow rates go evenly down in two different sections. Wouldn't work if there was a massive flood, and here we are with massive floods. Now, these cities you may have heard of that are underwater and becoming more underwater. You see Chongqing and Chengdu up there, far west. Three Gorges Dam, that fills all the way back up to Chongqing, by the way. That's how long that basin is and how gigantic the reservoir is. And that is totally full, to the point where it's emergency release in both Yichang and the Three Gorges area. But you might notice a couple of these other names that you're familiar with. Wuhan City, that area is going to be under between 6 and 9 feet of water sweeping downstream all the way to Nanjing and then ultimately out in Shanghai, where predictions are at least 20% of the city of Shanghai will be 6 feet or more underwater, and they will need to evacuate 20 million people just from Shanghai. Now, so far, the evacuation, they're giving people about 2 hours, especially in the countryside towns, before they let loose on the levees and then flood the farm fields. But what I find interesting here, this is off Taiwan Media, central government China was publishing the inflow numbers into the Three Gorges, and also the inflow numbers to almost all the other smaller dam catchment areas that lead into this whole river basin system there. And then suddenly on the 19th, and what you can see on the left side there where it says 163.96, they just quit publishing the inflow data. They put the outflow data at 38,000 cubic meters per second. But then on the 20th, they put some numbers back in there, and there was an app that would feature all this information, government-based app, and then suddenly cannot be found. They quit publishing all data. Now, this would make sense if there was so much water coming in, just like the Oroville Dam. If you did the calculations, you could see about 18 to 20 hours in advance that it was going to spill over that emergency spillway. I did a full video on that, outpacing the government of California by 18 hours, calling the overtop of the emergency spillway. This would be no different. If you can do simple math, you can see what the inflow is versus the outflow, and then you could get a good indication of how massive these floods are going to be. I think it's going to be so massively above anything expected that they don't want a panic situation downstream where they're going to freak people out, literally, so they're just going to stop publishing the information. Now, the Three Gorges Dam, pretty high in the reservoir behind it. Don't know if this thing's going to actually overtop, but the amount of water that needs to be released continuously, as they're expecting another 10 inches in this same basin area over the next 5 days. The runoff continues, and just a spackling of images through the cities. Now, the most interesting for me was the factory zones that are inundated across a majority of the highest density manufacturing in China. Now, this is where the personal protective gear is focal point right now for the planet to get all that sterile gloves, masks, whatever. That's all underwater. This is going to be months before they can even get anything back up to production again. And it's just one example of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these factory zones. They're special economic zones or something in between. And when we look at the cities themselves, it's picture after image, after slide, after graphic, looking exactly like this. 100 million people, maybe more, 200 million people are affected for sure. Rescue operations, city after city after city. And it's pretty interesting when you get into the, say, second or third tier cities. I can't believe people are still trying to drive through there. Don't they realize that once their car stalls that they need to walk away? Better, I guess, than to be in the bottom of a parking garage that's 6 floors deep, though, I guess. It's getting so bad that they're starting to blow dams and levees, so there's no massive catastrophic failures with overtopping. So as they're doing this, a lot of second and third tier cities are being overwhelmed into the croplands and discharging floodwater. Major cities, at least 3 to 9 feet underwater everywhere you look, every image. It's startling how much flooding there is. And then you start to take a look. This is down a street. Those signs are probably 6, 7 feet. If I'm 6 foot, I could easily walk under those signs. So how much water is in the street do you think? This is everywhere across the central region of China. And this is the vastness of the floods through the croplands. This is the point of the video. This is China's grain crop for the year, as well as animal husbandry with fowl, swine. Everything they eat for that country that was grown this year has been wiped out. So it's going to leave one of two things. A massive famine is going to occur because they can't feed, or they're going to go on a massive buying spree. Because when you look in the farming towns themselves, where the people live to even go in the fields, it looks like this. And again, smaller governmental Village heads are blowing these levees, and there's some good images. If you like to see mud getting jettisoned into the sky and then massive waterfalls following it, those videos are for you. And this is a great example here of what I mean by a small stream turning into a waterfall and discharging out of the mountains into these catchment basins. Now, this is just one example. Somebody had a video, great video. And almost all this water is just flooding unchecked into farm fields already anyway. It's taking the path of least resistance. So these areas are completely filling, and the governments understand that if they don't release the water, it's going to keep backing up further and further and further. So they're making the choice to sacrifice the levees. Like we've seen this in America too last year with the Nebraska floods. And they blew a lot of levees so it wouldn't overtop into major cities. But this is what it looks like now. More images of farm fields and crops that are not going to be harvested this year or sent to market. So you've seen the previous images of where the central zone is for all the record-setting flood level rivers as well as the catchment basins. This is the rice growing map here for China. Extreme drought where they're growing rice in the north and in the south at the moment. I've seen a fair few videos where there's not going to be much rice yield just from the sheer amount of drought. Now the corn and the wheat, right in the same areas. And as we look through what is image after image after image of food disappearing in real time, even greenhouses. I mean, you can prevent rain from inundating your crops in a greenhouse, but you can't prevent these types of floods from below. And wherever you look, it is all encompassing. And if we do head further back into the mountains, we start to see losses at the local farmer level up in the more remote villages or village areas as well. The floods are so vast that they're sweeping down and actually wiping out land where these farmers plant right along the streams because it's such easy access to the water. Now, to get a good gauge of that, this is what it looks like after the floods come through on the local level. So how high was the water for that to go all the way up to that first terraced field there? You can see the stream way to the left is down below somewhere. That was an enormous amount of water that swept through there. And all that water that passed is now heading down to fill into the Three Gorges Reservoir. This is from a raised roadway. A couple truckers took this. Apparently there were cornfields that are under the water somewhere. And the vastness is just, it's staggering. The smaller infrastructure that was outside the major cities that had reinforced concrete, raised highways or whatever, these bridges are just being washed away left, right, and center. So even to deliver or get something up or out of these farm areas is going to be very difficult. So if they did have crops to deliver down, it's just not going to happen. And another example of a small, very local discharge plant would block off the largest stream further up and just catch the water for the farmers. Now they've had emergency releases way up in the mountains. And over the last couple of days, there's been a massive landslide filling these exact catchment areas downstream. It's a great example of what's happening. See the landslide? It's creating that massive reservoir behind. Well, once that breaks loose from the earthen dam, it's going to come slamming into this set of smaller dams and wipe them completely off. They're going to be scoured out of the earth. And this is what was catching water for farmers to use and rediverting it down these irrigation canals all through the remote countryside. This is the overlay of all the agriculture in China. And you can see the darkest of green is where all these floods are occurring. I would say without a doubt, China has lost more than half, if not more. With the droughts in the north, I'm going to say that reduced everything by 50% in Heirloom and that area. But when we get into the central area, it looks like 100% loss. So China's agricultural output this year is going to be reduced something 80 to 85%. And the last thing to take into consideration, you see the house down there at the bottom below these emergency dams that are being built in dikes all along the downstream areas. That's how much the flood water will inundate cities if these break. This is the last defense, and you can see how high the water is getting so close to overtopping these emergency embankments. I wish the best to the Chinese people to get through this, because this is the largest flooding that has occurred in the last 400 years at least. And this is the last defense before their entire country is inundated and 400 million people need to move. When these sets of levees go, these are the last defense before the larger cities are overwhelmed above what's already inbound from the regular overflows. And did I mention the locusts have arrived as well? So if the floods haven't destroyed, the locusts will. I showed you the smaller infrastructure. There'll be no way to get pesticides or insect remediation chemicals up into the fields. The farmers are on their own, and these swarms are vast, and they're sweeping in from the west, following the floods, interestingly enough. So what the floods don't get, the locusts will pick off. I don't know what's going to happen over there. I truly don't, but we are seeing something unprecedented in human history here. As this tapers out over the next couple of weeks, you're going to see one of the largest mass migrations of human population ever undertaken on this planet. And the food prices are going to skyrocket as China tries to grab anything they can from around the planet to feed their people. They're going to start locally right in Asia with the rice. So look for the rice prices to just go rocket ship vertical, and everything else around the planet will follow. So your food price is probably going to double due to the need of, they're not growing any food. And whatever they had stored is completely flooded. So they're literally starting from zero again to feed 1.5 billion people. And as I've been putting out timelines since the beginning of my research here with the grand solar minimum, it's right on track. 2020, the crash, 2021, the crop losses. This will be the catalyst for the world to wake up and understand something has definitely changed, and it's from the sun on a 400-year cycle, if not a larger, more powerful 2,000-year cycle. The world food shortage is inbound. I talk about all of this on my Patreon channel /Adapt2030. You can join me over there for as little as $1 a month to help support the channel, and I'll bring you some more information that I can talk more freely without having my thoughts put into a box of censorship. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. I'll see you next time.